We'll continue our study of Song of Songs today. We'll be in chapter 5. We left off last time. We talked about this relationship between Solomon and this young lady from Shunem. And we've seen their courting relationship. We've seen, last time we studied their wedding and their wedding night. So Song of Songs is called this because it's kind of like Lord of Lords or King of Kings. This was the greatest song that Solomon had written. He wrote 105 songs, but this one's the best one, and it's a romantic love story. It's a lesson and testament to God's design for relationships and marriage. And the central theme is love and the power of love. And we've talked about how Solomon compares it to death and to fire and to rivers and wealth. All of those things we see in our world are extremely powerful. God made love. God is love. And so we should look to God for guidance in relationships when it comes to that. And we're most successful when we follow His rules. When we introduced it, we showed the Hebrew poetry mechanism of a chiasm and how that pointed to the central verses in the book, which was the consummation of their marriage in 4:16 and 5:1. And then we see that the accounts here of this marriage relationship complement the Genesis account of creation and God making Adam and Eve, man and woman, and putting them together. And we see the garden imagery throughout this book, and that points us back to the Garden of Eden, because this was God's design. And marriage and love and all that goes with that, God created that. And our culture has corrupted that to the point where it's even difficult to talk about it in church because we've corrupted it so much by our society. But we see can organize the book by the courtship, the wedding, and then the maturing marriage after that. You've seen in chapters 1 and 2, they had a couple of dates. They went on a picnic. They went on a walk in the countryside. And we see many descriptions here of their affirmations of love for each other. And they've used imagery that we don't really understand, and we'll see more of that today. But we saw leading up to their wedding, she had a dream in chapter 3. And now beginning in chapter 5 today, it looks like she has another dream. So let's begin reading in chapter 5, verse 2. She says, "I slept, but my heart was awake. Listen, my beloved is knocking. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my flawless one. My head is drenched with dew, my hair with the dampness of the night. I have taken off my robe. Must I put it on again? I have washed my feet. Must I soil them again?" My beloved thrust his hand through the latch opening. My heart began to pound for him. I arose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with flowing myrrh on the handles of the bow. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had left. He was gone. My heart sank at his departure. I looked for him, but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer. The watchmen found me, and they made their rounds in the city. They beat me. They bruised me. They took away my cloak. Those watchmen of the walls. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, if you find my beloved, what will you tell him? Tell him I am faint with love. So the beginning here says that she was slept, but her heart was awake. So some scholars think that's kind of a literary way of saying she was having a dream. Or she might have been waiting up for her husband to come home and just kind of dozed off, half asleep when he arrived. But we see that they've been separated. And he's coming to see her late at night. It says his head was wet from the dew of the night, so dampness of the night. So he may have been working a long day, returning home. I didn't know this, but many scholars said that back then they slept in different rooms, different chambers. So he would have been visiting her to see her that evening, and knocking on the door, and she was a little frustrated. She was a little upset. She didn't immediately open the door and let him in. What did she say?
She got him undressed and cleaned.
She was in the bed. She was taking her robe off. She was cozy in the bed, and she says, "Do you really want me to get up and put my robe on again? Do you really want me to get up and dirty my feet again? I washed my feet. I'm in the bed. Why, you're coming home late, and now you want to trouble me to get out of bed." So she was showing her frustration here with his late arrival, and that was frustrating her. But we see him reaching out to her, talking. He says, "My sister, my darling, my dove, my flawless one." He's kind of dripping with sweetness, isn't he? He maybe knows he's a little late. So he's approaching this very, very timidly and softly, but she refuses to let him in. She's frustrated by his tardiness and his lack of attention to her. And one relationship expert said that women need 4 things: time, talk, tenderness, and touch. And she was obviously not getting any of those at this moment because she was frustrated with Solomon. But then she gets up to open the door. So evidently she had a change of heart. Maybe his sweetness did make a connection. It's always a good idea to start there, just to see how it'll work. So maybe she had a change of heart, but either way, she gets up, she goes and opens the door. It says she's dripping with myrrh, so maybe she even refreshes herself before she opens the door, but she's too late. She opens the door and he's gone. So he is now, he's left. So he wanted to see her. Even though it was late at night, he still wanted to talk and touch and be there for his wife, but she was frustrated and now he left. What do you think he was feeling as he left? Oh, I deserve that? Or is he maybe a little frustrated now too? So we have this beautiful courtship and wedding, and now the honeymoon's over. They're having a quarrel. And we know that if you're in a relationship long enough, that will eventually happen, right? We'll have problems, and so we'll see how they work through this. And it's a good example for all of these things. But and the first thing, what does she do? She goes and looks for him. "My heart sank at his departure," she says. "I looked for him but did not find him, and I called him but he did not answer." So he's gone, and we can imagine it. Maybe he's disappointed, maybe even frustrated as he departs his wife's bedchambers. And now she's upset because she let him get away. And so she goes and looks for him. And then this narrative about she runs into the watchman, and that happened before in chapter 3. Remember that? She went out to look for him, and she found him, and she found the watchman. And here it says the watchman beat her, and they bruised her. And so this seems odd to me. You know, that's almost what kind of makes you think it's a dream, because I can't imagine her wandering around the city, seeing the watchman, and then they beating her up. But maybe it's a metaphor for the way she was feeling. Maybe she was feeling guilty. Maybe she felt like she needed to be punished because of the way she treated him. And so that, to me, is what leads you to believe it may be a dream or kind of half dream, half reality as she's sleeping and dealing with this. But she said it felt as if her cloak was taken from her, and she was bruised and beaten. So she was lonely, cold. She was hurting emotionally because of their separation. She rejected him, and him leaving may have felt like a rejection to her. And she told him she was faint with love. So she's anxious to see him now, even though they had this difficult disagreement. So the watchman may have been symbolic of her conscience, or maybe even the Holy Spirit, how it convicts us sometimes when we do things wrong. And she reaches out to the daughters of Jerusalem, and she seeks help from them, asking, if you see my husband tell him I'm looking for him. And so this is a problem in a relationship, and all relationships will experience this at some point. We all have tension, and the success of a relationship is how well you handle these problems, and they can actually be points of maturity and growth in the relationship if they're handled well. So I think one of the dangers is as you're together and you become familiar and things get into routines and habit, that can breed complacency. And we take our partners for granted, assuming they'll always be there. We can let annoyances stack up to irritation, and then, lashes out of anger and frustration can cause problems. So, maybe this wasn't the first time he'd come home late. Maybe this was a pattern that now she was finally ready to say something about. So sometimes we can let things build and build and build, and finally then it explodes, right, to frustration and anger. And so these things can build in relationships, and we have to deal with those. And I get to travel a little bit for work, and just did that a couple of weeks ago. And one of the benefits of that is I realized how much I miss my family and my wife, and sometimes she realizes how much she misses me. So it's actually a nice thing, to have that reminder. But if you're together and you don't separate, then it's easy to forget and take things for granted. But we see how she responded to this. When he left, she went right after him. So she sought him out. She didn't stay at home and sulk. She didn't, become passive aggressive and things like that. She went after him. So in a way, he kind of wronged her, but maybe he had a good reason. He's king. Maybe he had a lot going on. But she obviously was feeling ignored and abandoned, but she went after him. So she felt like she did wrong, and she went after him. She sought him. And do you remember when you were in a relationship and dating before you got married? Those were intense times, weren't they? You sought every opportunity to reach out to that person. You called them, or text them, or emailed them. When I was dating Misty, we didn't have text. So you had to pick up the phone and call somebody. And we did have email. We first met through email, and so I love to tell my story that we met online, because my mother-in-law gets crazy about that. So I think that's a good way to meet. But that's the way we first started talking, and then that led to phone calls, and then that led to a dating relationship, and then that led to frequent visits. And there was you were constantly seeking opportunities to be with that person. And when you were together, you talked and you shared feelings and opinions, and you just got to know each other the more you were together. And you kind of built this hedge around your relationship. As you became more intimate and together, you kind of built protection around your relationship, keeping others away. And then once you get married, you kind of feel like you've landed. You kind of feel like you've arrived, you caught the one that you wanted. Now we're married. She can't go anywhere. I can't go anywhere. So you stop seeking, don't you, in a way. You don't try as hard to meet and to spend time together. And then life gets busy with work and jobs and family and kids, and it just really is hard to prioritize the time together. But one of the things is we shouldn't stop seeking like we did when we were dating. There was a motivation and an inspiration to seek one another out at all times. And so, can we take that inspiration back into our lives today and seek one another, seek times together? And we have to remember that our relationships are on three levels. We're made as humans in mind, body, and spirit. We have physical bodies that need touch and affection. We have a mind and emotions that need connection, and we have a spirit, that needs connection with not only our God but our spouse. So we have to make sure we're nurturing our relationship on all three levels. And just spending time together maybe isn't enough. It's what are those emotional connections? Time talking, time sharing, time just discussing what's going on in life and the days and things like that. So, but think about a relationship on all three levels and what you're doing to nurture that. And one of the having traveled a little bit, as I mentioned, that also helps me think about a relationship in a way. What if your spouse was going away for a year on an assignment of some kind? And I'm mindful of our military that actually have to do this. That's a tough situation for any relationship. But imagine that spouse is leaving next week. What would you do this week in preparation for that? You would probably spend more time together. You would get some things arranged, but you would mostly, knowing that you were going to be apart for a year, you would spend time together. So my challenge to myself and my wife and even to you is think about that attitude. Why not take that attitude even though your spouse isn't leaving for a year? I think using that as inspiration, what would you do differently? We'll do it anyway, even though they're not leaving. Take that as the attitude we should come in our relationships with. Otherwise, we lean towards the side of complacency and taking them for granted and things like that. So she was seeking him, and I think that's a challenge for us in our relationships is, do you seek your spouse? Do you seek the one you have a relationship with and nurture it in a way that is healthy and an investment in the future? And I think even though the interpretation of this book, as we've talked about, is a relationship between Solomon and the girl from Shunem, we can also apply it to our relationship with God, and we certainly can apply it to our own relationships. But I think God created relationships, and He wants to be in a relationship with us. And so it's a great metaphor for our relationship to God. And so, are we seeking God the way we should? It's important to seek our spouse and nurture our relationships, but it's also important that we seek God. Matthew 6:33, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Proverbs 8:17, I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. Psalm 63:1, you, God, are my God, earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you, my whole being longs for you, in a dry and parched land where there is no water. Matthew 7:7 and 8. Seek, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be open. So our Lord wants us to seek Him. And He promises that if we seek Him, we will find Him. And I find that in my life, the busyness prevents me from seeking the Lord the way I should. It's a struggle to find the time amongst everything that's going on to really just sit and be quiet and seek the Lord in all you do. And so I see that needs to be a priority, whether it means staying up late or getting up early or foregoing a TV show or something. This is a challenge in our lives, and I'm not so sure Satan hasn't planned it that way. Busyness it can be a problem if you let it become a priority. And so seek God the way we seek our spouses, and that's what God desires, and that's what we should be doing as Christians. Any comments or questions before I move to the next section? Kind of threw a lot out there at you. Okay, let's read on in verse 9. The friends respond to her now. How is your beloved better than others, most beautiful woman? How is your beloved better than others that you charge us? And then she says, my beloved is radiant and ruddy, outstanding among 10,000. His head is purest gold. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves by the water streams, washed in milk, mounted like jewels. His cheeks are like beds of spice, yielding perfume. His lips are like the lilies dripping with myrrh. His arms are rods of gold set with topaz. His body is like polished ivory decorated with lapis lazuli. His legs are pillars of marble set as bases of pure gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as its cedars. His mouth is sweetness itself. He is altogether lovely. This is my beloved. This is my friend, daughters of Jerusalem. Where is your beloved gone, most beautiful of women? Which way did your beloved turn, so that we may look for him with you? My beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to browse in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He browses among the lilies. So these friends, this begins by the friends questioning her. And they're saying, the question they ask is, how is your beloved better than others? So it's almost like they're asking, why bother looking for him? He came home late, and you turned him away, and now he's gone. Why bother going after him? What is so great about him that you want us to go look for him? And then she answers. And she goes into this long list of things that describe what is good about her beloved, which we interpret to be Solomon. And much of this seems to be a physical description, because she uses things of his body, but some of it, I think, even goes deeper than that. So she said, to begin with, that he was, my beloved is radiant, ruddy, outstanding among 10,000. So he was better than 10,000 men. So he stood out above them. He's more handsome than all these men, but he was better than all these men. She said his head was more valuable than gold. So this meant he had wisdom, and he had purity in his motives and behaviors. She described his hair as wavy and black. So there was no gray. He was youthful and vibrant. His eyes were soft and tender and of doves. And we said that means that he had only eyes for her. But his eyes were white, not red. So how do you get red eyes? You're either sleepy or drunk. So he had white eyes. So he wasn't a drunkard. Cheeks. So you can imagine cheek to cheek that the embrace would be sweet. Talks about his arms. And here there might have been an allusion to a gold band that kings wore that was a sign of authority. They talked about his body being ivory, which is pure, and a sign of moral and spiritual strength. His legs were physically strong, a strong foundation. His mouth was sweet, speaking kind words. And his appearance was tall and stately, probably both physically but also as a king. He would have been a very strong character and held in high esteem. And so she was attracted to not only his physicalness but also his pure and moral and something of strong character that people admired. But the most, to me, the most important thing she says here is, this is my beloved, this is my friend. And so they had a friendship in their relationship. And he was altogether lovely. So this was her husband, and she was proud of him, and she was attracted to him both physically and emotionally. And I think this friendship that she described is an emotional connection that we need to nurture. As I mentioned, we're mind, body, and spirit. We need to have relationships in all three levels. And so when we live together, we're roommates, we're co-parents, we're financial partners, we're family, but I think being friends, it takes an investment, in time and energy. I think of friends that I had in high school and friends that I had in college, and the friends that I have now. It's hard to stay in touch. It's hard to nurture those relationships because you're just busy. And I think about calling, and it's like, oh, maybe they're busy. I don't want to interrupt their evening. And so it's, occasionally you can send a text or an email, but it's really hard. But again, we should make sure we invest in the friendship with our partners, and that takes time. It doesn't happen naturally just because we're co-located. And so That's one of the things we can take from this is what can we do to improve our friendship with our spouse. And just reflecting on that question myself, it's time, it's energy put into talking and sharing and doing those things that you would do with any other friend. It's just, don't take it for granted that your spouse is living under the same roof. That doesn't automatically lead to a friendship. These friends respond with another question. Where has your lover gone? So they must have been satisfied. So they started out by asking, why should we even go look for him? Why bother? And she answers, and then they say, okay, well, where's he gone? So they must have been satisfied that, she really wanted to find him, and he was worth finding. And so she says, he's gone down to the garden. He's browsing in the lilies. And so this may have actually referred to a real garden that he tended, or one of his, Solomon would have been king. He would have had many possessions, fields, gardens, things like that. And so this could have been also a metaphor for just him doing the business of running a kingdom. This is his job. And then she closes by saying, I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. So I think this is a sign of their commitment to one another. They're in a marriage relationship. They are one, the way God designed it. Husband shall leave his father and mother, be united to his wife, and they shall be one. Let no man put that asunder. And so her attitude at this point, so she's gone from frustration to regret to seeking him, and now she has this attitude of reconciliation. She has this attitude of commitment to the relationship, to mend it, and as a result, mature it. I think this is important for relationships to be successful, is to be committed to the relationship. Even though you're having problems, you have to realize that I'm committed to making this work. So there shouldn't be threats of, well, if you don't do this, I'm leaving you, or fights that end in, well, I want a divorce. I don't want to work through this. Those are not healthy in a relationship. You leave the other one wondering. You leave the other one, frustrated. So we have to be committed to the relationship and be fair when we fight, so that we don't damage the relationship beyond repair. And so being united as one and maintaining that commitment is very important as we deal with problems that are going to come up. Fight fair, and fight with an attitude of reconciliation. And she sought him out, seeking to make amends. She realized how much she appreciated and wanted him, and she desired his reconciliation and healing of their relationship. And so let's see, now that they're reunited, what he says. In verse 4 of chapter 6, he says, you are beautiful as Tisrah, my darling, as lovely as Jerusalem, as majestic as troops with banners. Turn your eyes from me, they overwhelm me. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep coming up from the washing. Each has its twin, not one of them is missing. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. 60 queens may be, 80 concubines and virgins beyond number, but my dove, my perfect one, is unique. The only daughter of her mother, the favorite of the one who bore her. The young women saw her and called her blessed. The queens and concubines praised her. The friends say, who is this that appears like the dawn, fair as the moon, bright as the sun, majestic as the stars in procession? I went down to the grove of nut trees to look at the new growth in the valley, to see if the vines had budded, or the pomegranates were in bloom. Before I realized it, my desire set me among the royal chariots of the people. Come back, O Shulamite, come back, that we may gaze on you. And then why would you gaze on the Shulamite as on the dance of Mahanam? So they get back together, and what is his response? It reminds us of his affection that he expressed to her earlier in the book. He doesn't have anything mean to say. He loves her. He's attracted to her. And so there's a tone of reconciliation here, of course. And then He compares her to two cities, Tisrah and Jerusalem. Tisrah was an agricultural community, and it literally means "you are my delight." And Jerusalem would have been majestic and elegant, but it literally means peace, or my refuge, my soul's refuge of peace. And so she's his delight, his peace. And so he missed her, he wanted her back, and now that she's come, he wants to reconcile with her. And then he repeated some of the same descriptions of her from chapter 4 with the eyes, hair, teeth, and temples. Her eyes overwhelmed him. Turn away. And so he was just taken by her look, her eyes, and he couldn't concentrate on what he was thinking. He said her hair is like a flock of goats descending from Gilead. So she had long, dark, flowing hair, as we discussed. Her teeth were white and straight. None were missing. Her temples were like pomegranates. So they were rosy. And so this could mean that either from blushing or from makeup, she was beautiful in the accentuation of her facial features. He then goes on to say that she is better than 60 queens and 80 concubines and all the virgins. She said, "My dove, my perfect one, is unique." And so this could be referring to the other women in his harem, but most scholars I read said, no, that's probably not the case. This is still, Solomon has not yet increased or enlarged beyond his first love here, even though we know that eventually he has 1,000 wives concubines. He could have been simply saying that no one in the king's court any king's court is better than she. She's prettier than a queen or a concubine that would have been part of any king's court. And so she was beautiful without competition. She had no equal. She was the only woman in the world that mattered to him. And even the young women agreed. The young women saw her and called her blessed, and they praised her. And so she was a beautiful woman, but to him she was also his wife now, and the one that he wanted to spend his life with. The king went on to check on the harvest, and then he visualized himself in a royal chariot. This is a very tough verse to interpret. Many scholars don't agree on what these verses mean, but he was a king. He had lots going on. The lands, the fields, they would have been tilled and productive. But the friends asked to see the girl again, and they called her a Shunammite. And this is the only place in the book where she's referred to this. So this could mean she's from Shunem. It could be her actual name. It could be the feminine form of Solomon. She is the one with Solomon. It could be a reference to a goddess, pagan goddess, and it could be a name derived from Hebrew meaning the peaceful one. So we don't really know for sure. Many people call her Shunammite as her name, but it could have been where she's from or any of these other meanings. So. And then he refers to a dance. So this reconciliation led to a party in his mind, a dance. And when we have problems, if we work through it in a fair and meaningful way, then relationships grow and they mature. And he compared this to having a party. And so conflicts are inevitable, resolutions are not. We have to work at that, and it takes deliberate attention and requires forgiveness and unconditional love and a commitment to a relationship. But these are opportunities for it to grow and mature and turn into what God has designed it to be, fulfilling and nurturing in this life.